Hey there, and welcome to how to create a disintegration effect in Photoshop. My name is Aaron Nace, and I'm so excited for this tutorial. So we've got a lot of really cool things we're going to be doing, basically working with one image and creating custom brushes to actually create a particle system in Photoshop. Then what's super cool is we're going to be able to apply layer effects to give them a little bit of a three-dimensional effect to match the lighting in our scene. So we've got a lot of really fun things to do. The first thing we're going to do is get started making our custom brushes. Now, if you've been watching Phlearn for a while, you know that I'm a huge fan of custom brushes because you can do so many things with custom brushes. And in this case, we're going to be creating different particles that are spaced different widths from each other. Because for this dispersion effect, some of the particles we want like really far spaced apart, you know, like one over here and then one over there. But some we want a little bit closer clustered together. So that's why we're going to create a few different brushes with different particle spacing. And that's going to really help us out when it comes to actually painting these particles in. We've got a great tutorial for you. Let's jump into Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop. Let's go to File and down to Open. Now, here in your downloads, by the way, if you haven't already done so, be sure to download your sample images and your Photoshop brushes. So here's our download folder. We're going to go to Sample Images and open up Disintegration. There we go. And let's go ahead and hit Open. Alrighty. Now, in this section, we're going to be creating custom brushes. So it's really good to know how to do this, but we're also providing these custom brushes as a part of your download. So if you want to just like use the custom brushes that are included with this tutorial and then skip to the next section, that's totally cool too. All you have to do is just go to Window and then down to Brushes. There we go. And you're going to see I've got some brushes already in here. Let's go ahead and just delete a couple extras there. Fantastic. So here in your brushes menu, we'll just bring this right over here so we can see. Just simply go to the little menu item within your brushes module and go down to import brushes. Okay? And then you're just going to go into your Photoshop brushes folder and then double click on that ABR file that's included with your download, and it's going to auto populate your brushes right here inside of Photoshop. Okay. Now, in this case, the folder's empty on my computer right now because I haven't actually made those brushes yet, but that's what we're doing right now. So making brushes in Photoshop is really easy. We want to start off by creating a new document. We're going to hit Control or Command N for new, and this doesn't have to be very large. We're just going to go with 1000 by 1000 pixels, and that's actually perfect. So we're going to be doing this on a few different layers, and then basically testing this out on our image. So making a custom brush is actually done in two different steps. Step one is defining the shape of the brush, and then step two is defining the dynamics of the brush, like what it looks like, you know, when you actually paint it. Is it rotating the actual shape of the brush? Is it scattering it around? Things like that. Okay, so we're going to start off with step one, and that's creating the shape of the brush. So for that, really simple here, let's just grab our lasso tool. So we're going to hit L for the lasso tool. Let's go ahead and create a new layer, and then I'm just going to zoom in. Let's hit Control or Command plus to zoom in. There we go. And at the very top right here, I'm just going to create like a pretty random looking shape. Something like that looks pretty good. I want it to be a little bit more round. There we go. That looks good. Now, keep in mind that I want these to look like individual particles, and I want some roughness to them. That's why I'm using the lasso tool here. Okay, we actually want this little bit of roughness. If you wanted to, you could use a cube here, or you could use a sphere, really whatever you want. But in this case, I want a little bit of a rough shape. Okay, so there we go. That actually looks really good. And then we're going to go ahead and create another selection over here. Just hold Shift, and that's going to let you add to your selection. So Shift, and then we're going to create another one. There we go. And then on my new layer, I'm going to go, you can fill this in a number of ways. You can go to Edit and then down to Fill. Boop. And then we'll fill this with black. Okay. You can hit Shift Delete and then choose what you want to fill it with. Okay. Black or white. There we go. Or you can hit D for your default colors, which is always going to be white and black. And then if you hit Control or Command Delete, it's going to fill with your background color. And if you hit Alt or Option Delete, it's going to fill with your foreground color. My foreground color is black in this case. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be doing from here on forward because it's fast. just want to let you guys know there are a couple ways to do that. Okay, so we're going to do this a couple times. So let's go ahead and make that invisible now. There we go. Here's our next one. And then this one, I just want to be further spaced apart. There we go. And then I'm going to hit Option Delete, Alt or Option Delete. There we go. That makes our second one. Okay, and now it's time for our third one. And I'm choosing not to use the same particles and move them around. The reason I'm choosing not to do that is because I want these particles to look as unique as possible, right? There we go. Okay, and now we'll make another one of these. Notice I'm just spacing these farther apart. There we go. Great. And one more layer here. Deselect by hitting Control or Command D. There we are, and then this one you're going to be right in the bottom left corner there. Okay, and then I actually want to do one more. I know we're getting crazy with it. One more, and that's going to be right up here. And then this other one, I just want to choose a tiny, 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 tiny little area. So I'm actually going to hit Control or Command plus a couple times and go all the way to the bottom, and then just choose a tiny selection, like that big, like. Here, I'll just zoom in even more so you can see. Like, it's just tiny, tiny, tiny. And then hit Alt or Option Delete. So that's like literally like 4 or 5 pixels. You could use the brush tool and just paint a tiny dot. So you can actually see that here. Oh, I forgot to fill this one in here too. There we go. And let's add a thing there. Okay, great. So this one, I've got my big dot here on the top right, and then this tiny little dot on the left. What this is going to do is it's going to allow me to space this particle really far apart from itself, and basically you won't even see that tiny, tiny, tiny little particle. It's just a cool trick because we're going to show you in a second when we go to step 2 of creating our custom brushes, where we add things like scattering and shape dynamics and spacing. But the whole deal is it's going to use the size of the brush to determine scattering, right? And if I just did one particle, the size of the brush would be relatively small, be just that one particle. And if I scattered it a bunch, they'd still be close together. But now this brush is actually really big, okay? The brush itself is going to include all the way to the top right corner and the bottom right corner. So it's going to be a big brush, but basically you're just going to see one little particle in the top right corner of it, okay? So that tiny particle there just increases the brush size. So when I scatter it, instead of it being like this scattered around, it's like this with its tiny points here, and that's going to scatter around. It's going to give us a lot more space to scatter, and it's going to create a larger dispersion brush, basically. Okay, so that's the idea there. So we've got a bunch of different layers now. Let's go ahead and start defining these as custom brush presets. Super easy to do. So click on your first layer, and again, to make any custom brush in Photoshop, you just want a white background and black for your brush. So we'll go to Edit and down to Define Brush Preset, okay? And I'm just gonna call this 1 for now. There we go, and we just created one. Go to our next one, okay? Edit, Define Brush Preset, and we're just gonna call this 2. Remember, this is step 1. These brushes are gonna wind up getting deleted. We won't need them because we're gonna create new brushes with the second step. Okay, there we go. We'll just call this one 3. Okay, and you can call these whatever you want, but I'm just trying to save some time here. Perfect. All right, Edit, Define Brush Preset. This is going to be called, what did we call this one? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. And we'll go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, and we're going to call this number 6. I don't know if you can see it, but Koa, my puppy, just joined us. Alrighty. I call him a puppy, but he's 4. But he'll always be my puppy. Okay, there we go. So now we just defined brushes 1 through 6. Okay, so we're actually pretty much done with this document. Let's go back to our original document, and now we're going to hit F for full screen and start to get an idea of how these brushes actually work, and we're going to move into phase 2. Okay. So phase 2 is taking those shapes that we just made And now we're going to apply things like scattering and shape dynamics to this. Now, I'm going to be using a pressure-sensitive tablet for this. This is a Wacom Intuos Pro small tablet. Basically, the harder I press, I'll be able to control some things with my brush. Now, you can most definitely do this with a mouse or a trackpad as well. So you don't need one of these tablets. It will give you a little more control, so I actually love these things. But if you're just working with a mouse or a trackpad, you're totally good. You're going to be able to create this effect, so no worries there. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. Okay, Shift Option Command N will create a new layer, or you can just click on this plus icon down there. Okay, and then we're going to hit B for the brush tool, and I'm going to right click. And here you can see, let's just go ahead and make everything collapse our groups here. So you can see we just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Perfect, just like we made. Okay, let's go ahead and click on number 1 and start painting around with this. And you're going to see that's what it looks like. Okay, not exactly what we want. So we're doing this all on a blank layer. How do we get this how we want? Okay, we're going to go to Window and then down to Brush Settings. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this out because we're going to be hanging out with our Brush Settings menu basically for the rest of this tutorial. And now it's time to introduce some of our settings. So first thing we're going to take a look at is spacing. And that's right here in the brush tip shape. Spacing, this is where you can start to space them out a little bit. Okay, and then I'm just going to make my brush 100% visible. So we're going to space those out a little bit. Okay. Now, while I'm creating this brush, I hit Control Command A, so you can see here I've got a selection around my entire image. That just selects all, and then if I hit the delete key, it just deletes everything in the selection. It doesn't delete the layer though. Okay, if you don't select all and hit delete, it'll delete the layer. I don't want to do that. I just want to delete basically while I'm creating, so I can create something, make a change, create something, make a change, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So spacing we're going to bring up. Shape dynamics is the next one. So we're going to bring up size jitter. Okay, I want some of these to be larger and some of these to be smaller. There we go. Let's delete that away. Next we're going to turn on angle jitter, and this is going to rotate them. So you can see every time I do this, it's like, oh yeah, it's getting a little bit varied. I'm going to bring up my minimum diameter just a little bit. This is, you can see here, some of these are tiny and some of these are big. I'm just going to bring this up a little bit so they're going to be a little bit more similar sized. Now I'm going to flip the X and the Y jitter also. There we go. And that's, again, just going to give us a lot more variation. So it's going to flip it vertically and horizontally as well. Next, we're going to go into scattering. I'm going to turn on both axes and we're going to go ahead and give it some scattering. So there we go. You can see it's scattering around. Okay. Now, it's a little bit too large. So I'm going to use my open and close brackets to get a little bit smaller. There we go. And this is, again, this is going to be the closest to my subject and also the most dense. So I'm going to bring our scattering down, which is going to make it a little bit more dense. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my spacing down, which is going to make it a little bit more dense as well. So you can see spacing up, okay, not so dense. Spacing down, now we're looking like a little bit more dense. There we go. And that's actually looking pretty good. Keep in mind, all of these settings can be changed at any time, okay? Now my shape dynamics, I'm going to turn the control on to pen pressure. That way if I press hard, it's going to get large, and if I press soft, it's going to get smaller. And I'm going to bring my minimum diameter down a little bit there. There we go. Okay, so now we can see from one little bit of dots, now I'm able to paint with this dispersion. And this is just our first brush, okay? Now that we've done all that, it's time to save this out as a brush again. So the first step was just saving the shape of the brush. Now we get to save it with all this stuff built into it. So we go to our menu here, we go to New Brush Preset, okay? And I'm going to call this Disintegration, okay? And we're going to call this 1, and then I'm going to put in parentheses, Dense, okay? So this is going to be the first brush in our series of what's going to be 6, and it's going to be the most dense. All right, there we go. So let's hit OK. And now if I hit B for the brush tool and right click, you can see I have Disintegration 1 Dense. Okay, now this here, just 1, that's just the brush tip shape. I actually don't need that anymore. Like I'm not going to use that because I have this. So I'm going to just click on this and then right click and then just delete it. Boom. Delete that brush. Okay, Sure, because I don't need it anymore, and it's just going to get a little bit confusing to have it in there. If I wanted to remake it, I still have that file that I can remake it from. Okay, so now it's time to do the second one. I'm going to jump on to, number 2, and then we'll speed this up a little bit because it's kind of like the same process over and over again. But now we're with the second one, so we get to start over, okay? Shape dynamics, we're going to turn on size jitter, we're going to bring our minimum angle up, our angle jitter, we're going to flip the X and Y, we're going to go to scattering, we're going to go ahead and scatter this on both axes and bring our brush tip shape. So you get to move a little bit faster now, which is a little bit more fun, right? And I'm going to hit the close bracket, the open bracket to, there we go. And that actually looks pretty good. So you can see this is less dense. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Again, just go right up here, go to new brush preset, and we're just going to call this disintegration 2. Okay, and then I'm going to put, I put dense on number 1, and I'm going to put like spaced out on number 6, so we get the idea. Okay, that looks pretty good. So let's hit B for the brush tool, right click, and then just in the number 2, I'm going to right click on that and delete that. There we go. So we have disintegration 1, 2, and then now we do the same thing for 3. All right, I'll go pretty quick with this here. There we go. We'll size jitter up, minimum diameter, angle jitter, flip the X and the Y, scattering, both axes, yes, some scattering, yes, some spacing. Okay, and keep in mind, there's no right or wrong here, but you can see we're going a little bit less dense, and I'm going to bring up my spacing a little bit more, which is going to make it even more less dense. There we go. 3. Okay, and you can change the names of these at any time. There we go. So now we'll just go ahead and delete that one. Alrighty, I'm going to do the same things with 4 and 5. We'll speed that up and then we'll come back for 6. Alrighty, there we go. Just created number 5. We can just delete regular number 5. There we go. And we're going to come back for number 6. So here's number 6. Let's go ahead and get out of there. Now with number 6, you can see if I just start painting around, there we go. We got a big, basically I have 1, and it is creating this small little dot. You can see it here. Like if I zoom in, you can see that's our tiny little dot that we created. But once I make my brush smaller, again, open and close brackets for that, you're not going to really see that other tiny dot. You can see it just looks like one dot. But check this out. As soon as I start, I'm going to just bring in angle jitter to start with. As soon as I just start bringing angle jitter, look at how much like rotation we have. Let's just bring it down a little bit more. So it's, instead of just looking like it's the same dot that's rotating one little dot, it's rotating the entire brush. There we go. So with just angle jitter, it's now going to put some of these little dots, and you'll see if I zoom way in, you can't even see that other tiny little dot that we made. We have to make it quite a bit bigger to see it. There we go. So you can see now it is actually putting that tiny little dot in there, okay? But once you get it small enough, you're not going to see it. So this is going to allow us to create just like very largely spaced particles. This is the only way that I know how to do it in Photoshop. So again, we'll turn our size jitter on. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put pen pressure on to our size jitter, bring up our minimum diameter a little bit, angle jitter, flip the X and the Y. We're going to go turn on scattering. Now, for these particles, we want them very far apart, right? So we're going to bring our scattering up higher, and we're going to bring our spacing up higher. Okay? And now let's go ahead and just make our brush a little bit smaller. And then there we go. So let's see now how this looks. So you can see I'm painting here, and these particles don't look like they have anything to do with each other, right? They're very spaced apart, and this is exactly what we want. And you can always, by the way, adjust these settings at any time. So we're including 6 brushes with this tutorial. If you're like, you know what, this one is just too scattered for me, just come in here and bring your spacing down, and look at this. It's not as spaced apart, okay? There we go. So I would recommend just going in here and changing these settings. We're starting off with like a really good baseline here, things that should work for this entire tutorial and any type of particle system that you want to create. But if you want to make those changes, these brushes can be changed at any time. Just go to Window and Brush Settings and you can change any of these settings. So let's go ahead and make our last one here. We're going to go to New Brush Preset. All right. I don't even know if I'm spelling disintegration correctly. So thankfully, we got the rename. We can just rename these brushes at any time. All right. So I called the first one is dense, and I'm going to call this one, what is the opposite of dense? Spaced out? There we go. Sure. I'll probably wind up changing that name because I'm feeling a little bit dense right now, not being able to think of what spaced out is. Less dense. Anyway, so let's go ahead and right click, and then I'm just going to delete that brush. So check it out. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we are good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save these out. We're going to hold Shift and click on some of these. Oh, by the way, I did actually make an error when I was making this. This one, I think I forgot to put shape dynamics onto pen pressure. Okay, so now I'm going to actually turn that on. I'm going to make a new brush preset here because this was part 2. I'm just going to go disintegration 2A because you can't save out another brush that has the same name. So we hit OK, right click, and then 2, we're just going to right click and then delete that brush because I made a mistake. And then 2A, we're going to rename this, and I'm just going to get rid of the A. Okay, and I think that I did that with 3 as well. So let me just make sure, yep, there we go, pen pressure, and then you want to just do a new brush preset. 3A, and then you can't override the current brush, unfortunately. All right, so we'll just delete that one. That's okay. And then 3A, we just rename this one and get back to just 3. And then 4, 5, and 6 all have pen pressure built into them. Cool. So a little bit of brush management for you. Let's hold Shift and click on these brushes. Boop. Maybe hold Control. Boop, 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 boop. Select them all. And now we go to our little gear icon, and I'm going to go down to Export Selected Brushes. Okay? And this is where we go ahead and put these in our Photoshop brushes, and we just call this Flern Disintegration. There we go, .abr. So when you load, if you decide you want to just load these brushes, that's exactly what you're going to get, is what I just made in here. But again, to load them, just simply go to your little gear icon, go down to Import Brushes, go to Flern Disintegration, hit Open. It's going to put them in a folder, which is nice, and then you get all 6 of these, which is cool. So I can go ahead and just delete these ones, because now I've got my in a folder. There we go, right click and then just delete brushes and hit OK. So Flern Disintegration, and we got all 6. So we go ahead and grab the first one. There we go. It's super large, so you're going to want to make it smaller. There we go. So this is our first one, you know, nice and close together. There we go. Should be actually closer together. I think I clicked on the wrong one. So there's 1. Okay. Here's 2. Oh, we don't have to change our brush size. I was just on my last brush. Okay. So 1, super dense. 2, and I'm just right clicking here. 2, less dense. Right click, go to 3, even less dense. Okay. There we go. 4, even less dense. So there we can see all over. You can still change your brush size by going open and close bracket if you want. There we go. 5, even less dense than that. There we go. And then 6, even less dense than that. Okay, so that can just be kind of everywhere. So you can see with all these brushes combined, this is super quick, but with all these brushes combined, you basically can run the entire gamut. And of course, don't forget, you can change your brush settings at any time. Alrighty, let's go ahead and just delete that layer. In the next section, we're going to start painting, and we really don't need these brush settings up anymore, so we're going to go ahead and close that. But don't forget, if you want it back up, Window down to brush settings, and any of these brushes. So check this out, this Flern Dense one, I can start painting with this and I'm like, that's not exactly right. I want to go up here and I want to bring up my spacing even though it's on dense 1 and it'll get less dense. Okay, so you have all of those options built into these brushes. Alrighty, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next section. Bye everyone. Alright, camera speeds, screen speeds, yes. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started, honey. I love you, have a great day.